Hello again, whiskey friends. Thanks for joining me today, everybody. And for today's Tuesday discussion, all of the videos that we do on Tuesdays are questions generated from the comments in YouTube, Patreon, or Instagram. So if you have a question, bring it to us. We will answer it with a video response such as this. And today's topic is all about single barrels. We do a lot of reviews on single barrels. That rubs some people the wrong way. Some people are cool with it. We'll get back to that one. But the question that I got was, is there a big variation between single barrels, or they all generally taste the same? And I understand kind of the motivation behind that question, because how often do we get a chance to taste, let's just say, 10 different single barrels from the same distillery to understand the range in the profile? That's not something that you typically are able to do. There are some brands where I have been able to do that over time. And as I've gotten to do more and more of these single barrel experiences and tasting and picking barrels, gotten to see the profiles from that sense as well. But that was ultimately what this commenter was interested in. Do I see a lot of variation in single barrels? And if I do, what is that all about? So I've got a few angles that I want to take on this particular question. So thank you for joining today, whiskey friends. Let's kick off the show. So in these Tuesday discussions, one thing I always like to do is to have a little dram while I'm sitting here having this conversation with everybody. So for today's pour, I got a Hard Truth Glen here, and I'll be drinking this Hard Truth single barrel. So this is a Hard Truth single barrel that we got directly from the distillery when we were recently doing a barrel pick with the Mash and Journey Whiskey Club. And this single barrel for Hard Truth absolutely blew us away. Gosh, I think it's like 2 years old, maybe 3 years old. And this is like Durrell's #1 whiskey of the year right now. If you saw Durrell's top 10 pours of the year. If you hadn't seen that, hey, come back to the channel, go check out Durrell's top 10, because he's got some good information in that as well. But man, this one ended up being the #1. That's pretty crazy. 2 years old, a rye, and a single barrel that was just for sale, in the lobby of the distillery there. Man, is it special. And if you have had Hard Truth, this is even stand out above just the blend and the batches of their sweet mash rye. This single barrel really steps out, and it really shows you what Hard Truth is capable of. So that's the first way we're going to address this question. That variation in the single barrels, is it there? Are they all kind of in the same range, or is it a very wide range of possibilities? Man, it runs distillery to distillery, but there is such a wide range of possibilities when it comes to single barrels. I was just sipping on a single barrel earlier this afternoon on my porch from Still Austin. And for whatever reason, review coming soon on this one, it tastes like blueberry muffins. The entire thing tastes like blueberry muffins. I didn't get blueberry muffins out of the regular release of Still Austin's cast strength, but there it is with the single barrel that tastes like blueberry muffins. Blows my mind. But there is a wide range of outcomes when it comes to single barrels. So you got to be careful. Sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. And sometimes they just go straight down the middle, and they're just as good as any blend. I think where I got my education on this earlier in my bourbon journey was on the Henry McKenna 10 years. So if you've had the Henry McKenna 10 year, so I'll pull this one up here. So this is the bottle I'm talking about, just so we're clear. So it's the Henry McKenna 10 year bottled in bond. Man, was this thing the craze when I first got into bourbon. It was like $30 for a 10-year single barrels. And some of these are really, really amazing. Other ones are straight drain pours. It is the weirdest thing I've ever seen. I don't know who is selecting these barrels sometimes. But that is where I got my education on the wide range of possibilities when it came to single barrels. I mean, some of these I would open and they would just be absolute hitters. And then the next one I would open, it would be flat and it just wouldn't have any flavor to it whatsoever. So confusing. And what I was doing before, at least, was always having a passing of the torch, single barrel to single barrel. So before I open the next one, I'd get down to the last pour of this one and I'd do a little comparison between the two to see what I was dealing with. I have had an extremely wide range of outcomes when it comes to Eagle Rare 10-year as well. The first Eagle Rare 10-year I ever opened up tasted like banana runts. I mean, we're talking straight Jack Daniels, like just the banana runts. Like, I don't know what was going on in that bottle. And when I tasted it, I was like, why is everybody like this? Like, I finally got my hands on an Eagle Rare, and this is like the weirdest non-Buffalo Tracy thing that I've ever had. Like, this doesn't make any sense. Started to make sense a little more after my second bottle, and then I got like a truer sense of the profile. Man, that's it though. I don't know who picks some of these single barrels sometimes, but we'll get to that part later on in the video. What I do love though, when I get the chance to try multiple single barrels, either by buying them myself or people send me samples and then I get to taste an even wider variety in a shorter period of time. And a great example of that is the Lucky 7 Proprietors. So if you've seen these as an example, what we found over time, at least me and a couple friends, is how much proof matters on these older age Barton barrels. We had a Lucky 7 that was 109 proof, a Lucky 7 that was 117, 123, 130, man, close to 140. There's about 10 different barrels that I'm thinking of, all between those. And the ones that were 130 plus were amazing. And the ones that were lower proof were just okay. And when you're talking about something that you're spending $150 on it, whether it's 109 proof or 136 proof, you kind of got to know that information. But it takes a while to learn that. You got to have that opportunity to learn that. The other thing that I think is really interesting about some of the single barrel brands, and in this particular case, I'll highlight the Russell's Reserve. But you do get to the point on these where, depending on the warehouse it was aged and depending on the floor, people end up having enough experiences with so many single barrels that they literally have a preference of where it was in the warehouse in terms of position. And they can taste the difference. I've got a friend that was telling me a story about this guy that he knows that can literally taste samples of Russell Reserve, and he will guess the warehouse and the floor. That is insane. And I kind of want to put him to the test someday. So I got to work on that. The only other brand that I've really had extensive experience with single barrels was New Riff. I have tried a lot of New Riff single barrels, and that's the advantage of it being $50. You can kind of take a chance on these as they go on. But once again, the range and outcomes, not just in terms of like the proof and everything, but generally the flavors that you would call out. The flavor notes can range even within the same brand. They might rhyme, they'll speak the same language, but they can really have some good variation. So that leads me back to the Hard Truth as another example on this one. When we did do the Hard Truth barrel pick, we ended up picking up something that was pretty off profile. I'm excited to try it again. From what I can remember, it tasted like root beer. So a rye that tastes like root beer. Why would a rye taste like root beer? This one tastes nothing like root beer. So we picked it because it was so delicious, it was so intriguing. But does it really showcase like Hard Truth score profile? I don't know. If that's going to be someone's introduction to Hard Truth, they're going to walk away with probably a weird impression of that brand. And that's the hit and miss of the variation in these single barrels. So the next question I got, and so I'm going to tie this together with another question because it was related to single barrels. But then I got the question of if I have a preference on the single barrels that I get. Like if there's just a single barrel, on the store, generic single barrel versus a store pick versus a group pick? Do I have any type of pecking order when it comes to these different picks, or is a single barrel just a single barrel regardless? Personally speaking, I tend to like the generic single barrels that are on the shelf at the stores a lot less than when they are actually picked. Now, the picker is a big aspect of that, and we'll come back to that. But when it's a generic single barrel, I always wonder, like, was this a single barrel that was left over that got, like, was unwanted, that didn't get picked in the single barrel program? Like, what led it to kind of getting through the selection process of so many different groups to then get bottled and end up on the store? So I'm always very skeptical. If I'm going to improve my odds, I would like to know that somebody tried it before I'm going to try it and that they actually picked it. It's not just something that ended up in the process and, poured out into a bottle just to get some volume out there on the shelf. But even when it comes to picks, I would say my pecking order is usually store picks, and then I like group picks better. So I tend to get more special things when it comes to group picks than I get with store picks. Now, some stores are better than others. Some groups are better than others too, and we'll get into that. But you got to understand, go and talk to the people at those stores and see why they pick something. See if you can get a sample of it before you even buy it. But if you can talk to the person that picked it, get a sense of their process and see if it aligns with your process. And sometimes you'll find that your process is totally different than their process. As an example, I've had some store picks that were just such easy drinkers that they were almost boring. And I think they were picked because they were such an easy sipper. But I don't know. I want something with some more flavor and some more oomph behind it if I'm going to get into a single barrel. But that was their profile. That was their motivation in picking it. So of course I'm not going to align with that. So if I don't know who picked it, hopefully I do, I tend to have less success than if I do know who picked it. Now, when it comes to group picks, some of the best things on my shelf come from private groups, especially when I know the people that are picking it and I trust their palate so much. And I can get their thought process on what they were looking for. Other times, there might be groups where you're just supporting the group and you're just supporting friends. And that's fine too. At least it's got the memories and the community tied to it versus just a generic store pick. I'm going to get another sip of this hard truth. So to wrap this thing up, one last question that I got about single barrels was, man, you do so many reviews of single barrels, I'll never have a chance to drink exactly what you're drinking. Yes, I agree with that. But that's not actually the point of the review, though. The point is to show you what's possible at that distillery. So when we do a Knob Creek review and it's scoring a 90 on our scoring system, we're just trying to show you what is possible with Knob Creek. Don't sleep on it. Don't have a expectation so low about it because it's Knob Creek. No, very, very capable of being special. So keep your ear to the ground on any brand, and we'll try to convey that in our reviews, especially when we do single barrels. But in general, geezy Pete, 80% of what I buy is probably a single barrel. So if I didn't review those, I'd have no content. I also don't really see the difference sometimes between somebody saying, oh, a single barrel is too limited, you shouldn't review those, or you shouldn't have those in your top 10 list or whatever. Man, what's the difference between that and like a special release that only has like 600 bottles or 800 bottles or 1,000 bottles or 2,000 bottles? Whatever that number is that's capped, it's still capped pretty darn low, and it limits everybody's possibilities of getting them. Why are those reviews fine, but the single barrels aren't? It doesn't make any sense. I'm going to drink whiskey. I'm going to review it. We'll put everything in context. Well, thank you for joining me today, whiskey friends. Let me know if you have any other questions about single barrels and the potential variation between single barrels. Ultimately, sometimes you are just playing a lottery ticket. Sometimes you find something special. Sometimes you just find the thing that you expect. Sometimes you find something a little funky. But either way, it is exploring whiskey, and exploring whiskey is always fun. Well, thank you for joining me today, whiskey friends. We'll catch you on the next whiskey discussion. Goodbye, everybody.
Jeff, just be friends with me. But you have these whiskey friends, and you say hello again. Oh, Jeffrey, you should just be friends with me. But you have these whiskey friends, and you say hello again. Oh, Jeffrey, you should just be friends with me. But you have these whiskey friends, and you